Okay, I'm going to get started. This is the class on extracting and using data from Springbrook and other sources. We're going to be using Springbrook, but most of these techniques will work fine on other sources and using them in Excel. We're not going to go into complicated ones. That's what's going to happen next time when I call a badly formatted report. So what we're dealing with, we're going to be extracting data from an external displayed table in Springbrook. Part of that would have to talk about file types because Springbrook lies about what file types they use. We'll talk about XML, XLS, and XLXS. Some file saving tips so that in the future you can find where you put things. And then we're going to spend a bit of time talking about tables in Excel because it turns out that that's a really useful feature for all sorts of things, and we'll be building on that in other classes. And then we'll talk about getting a report exported from Excel, exported from Springbrook into Excel and working with that. Springbrook does an interesting job of turning reports into Excel files, and it's not always the most useful format. So we're going to talk about how to turn that into a useful format. And finally, we're going to talk about a few functions which you'll find very useful: left, mid, right, and if. We're not going to go into any details about what kind of data extraction you want to do because I don't know what you're looking for, but we'll at least be able to get started on it. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this class. Now, this class is all in Excel. So of course, we're going to have to, and it's in Springbrook for our classes. So we'll get to look at Springbrook. You'll see the screen a lot. These are things we'll be looking at. This is basically in Springbrook. If you, in the maintenance section, you can get a list of cost centers, funds, things like that. Now, the important part about all this is that it is a table. There are rows and columns here. You've got in this case, it's cost centers. You've got the cost centers listed here, and you've got the types of cost centers. And there are times when you want this information. You can get the same thing when you look at a GL. There we go. This is the history of an account in last year. Again, you'll notice it has rows and it has columns. Now, what you can do with these is you can export them into Excel so you can actually work with them. I'm going to do it with this one. First, you'll sit there. Here we are on the table. Anywhere on the table, right-click on your mouse in Excel, and you'll have options. Export to Excel workbook is probably the one you want to do. You can generate a report. I've never done that. You displayed this also. The important part is you can export a table into Excel. You click on that. You're then brought to a dialog box. Here's your first issue. Notice that Springbrook is exporting it to the root of the Windows subdirectory. This is the bottom of your hard drive. This is a horrible place to save anything. You want to save it somewhere useful. Now here, first thought is, are you actually going to use this data in the future? If not, I just throw it in the downloads folder. That's automatically, this is everything you do in Excel, everything you download from the internet shows up here. If you're going to save it and use it in the future, you want to go to your documents folder, or you want to go to your OneDrive and save it wherever it's going to be. You might want to be sharing it to SharePoint so you can share with others. In this case, we're just going to go put it in downloads because that's what it is. The next thing, you're faced with another question, which is, what is the name? If you're exporting from Springbrook a table, it's going to be called grid export as the default. If you're only going to use it now, and then you'll never care about it again, and you aren't even going to open anything else, saving it as grid export is fine. Otherwise, you might want to give it a name. Like sometimes grid export 1. You save the file, then you go into Excel. It does not open automatically, and you find the file. File, open, on this PC, and some downloads. And if you go by date, you'll probably have to sort because it usually works that way. And there it is, grid export 1. Whoops. And then you open it. Now you get a dialog box that says you've got a problem. You don't. What this is Springbrook is lying to you about the file type. When you exported it, it gave you a name. It said it was a file type XLS. What is an XLS file? An XLS file, theoretically, is an Excel file from using the format from about 10 years ago. Back to the very beginning of time, they all had the same file format. Now, an XLS file has advantages and disadvantages. Everybody in the world can read an XLS file, but they're also larger and they don't have some of the capabilities that the new Excel files have. The problem is the Springbrook file is not really an XLS file. It's a different type of file called, there it is, XML. What is an XML file? It doesn't really matter. It's too much, except it's a database file. It structures everything into rows and columns, and so that's really useful for getting information to a database. The bad news is XML files don't hold formulas. So at some point, and you'll do this probably immediately, you'll need to change the file format to something useful. So first we'll say, yeah, I want to open it anyway, because I know the data's good. It's not something where they're trying to sneak in a virus onto your file. Only do this from a program that you know you trust. We trust Springbrook. It's running locally, and we know that every time we try to export, we get the same message. So we know that this is a trustworthy program, even though we get an error message. So we say, yes, open it up, and you'll notice there it is. This is the exact same information that we saw here. We've got the account number, no cost center assigned, 00, etc. And in Excel, we get the exact same thing. So now this is a useful way of getting your information into Excel. But if you make changes, if you've got a more complicated spreadsheet that you're going to put in formulas, you're going to want to change the spreadsheet format so that you can actually save it. So first, go to File, go to Save As. And here's where you can sit there. Here's where you see that it's an XML file. Using XML23 with a name of XLS, but it's actually XML. What you want to do is go here to drop it down. And here's the default format for Excel files nowadays are XLSX. An XLSX file for something this small isn't really all that important. The difference isn't that much. I have found, however, that it is stabler than just a regular XLS file here. This hasn't happened recently, but in the past, I would often be working on files that I've exported from Springbrook, and then Excel would crash and burn on me if I had it saved as an XLS file. But if I've saved it as an XLSX file, it would not crash and burn. So the first thing you want to do before doing anything else in the file is change it to an XLSX file. That's a good format. And it's usually safer to get rid of that too. So you sit there, and we're going to keep it in downloads because we're not going to save it. So I'm not going to sit there and try to save it somewhere useful where I can find it in a month. If you save a lot of files to your download folder, every now and then you're going to want to clean it out because otherwise IT will yell at you. So it is saved now. It is now an XLS file. It's now an Excel file. So we now have a file that we can use anywhere else. Now, this is a time when I'm going to move. You've got file saved, location. You can use this information elsewhere. This is kind of useless information other than as a lookup table because you're going to want to know want to be able to use this other information. So what I'm going to do now is do the same thing with a different table grid that you'll find more useful. So I'm going to close File, More, Close. And instead, I'm going to go back to Springbrook. And here is a list of transactions in an account. What account is it? It doesn't matter. But this is the Culture and Recreation promo advertising account from last year. Why did I pick it? Because I knew there's going to be more than 1 or 2 transactions. And you can see in the History tab all of the bills that we paid for the year. There aren't that many, but there are a few. You can also see from this tab all the budget changes we've made. In this case, we only did 1. You can see any purchase orders. There are none. Here in extended budgeting, you can see where the original was, if there was anything in the adopted budget. There wasn't in this case, but that's what these other tabs are good for. But history gives you all the actual transactions. Again, we export it. You'll notice here we can turn on and off columns in this table, which is useful if you actually have information that's in there that you can't see. But we'll go here, export to an MS Excel workbook, same thing. It comes up. We go to downloads. We call it grid export 2 because we can. I know you have an option here of changing file types. It doesn't work. It only gives you one option. Some programs you will have the choice of different file options. You go to save. You go to Excel. You go to open. You go to this PC. You go again, find your downloads. Let it think. Let it find it. There we go. Whoops, that was dumb. Go back up, try again. Sometimes it just runs, sometimes you're clicking faster than it's thinking. Same error message, we want to open it anyway. Now here you've got more useful information. You've got journal entry number, you've got the date of the transaction, what period it is, the year, the debit and the credit, what system created it, which is usually AP or GL. Those are the two systems I'm seeing. The name of the vendor, which is really, really useful, and the description. You've also got the system reference, which they can dig it up, and the last batch user, which is the person who did it, and the proof list. These last two columns I don't find any use for, but other people do. Now you have a nice bit of information here, so if you wanted to sit there and go, how much did we spend last year, you could just total up the column. But a lot of times you want to know how much you spent to a specific vendor, or sometimes how much you spent on purchasing cards, or you want to see some of this information and some of it you don't. So now we're going to talk about a feature that's in Excel that people don't generally use that much, and that's tables. The first thing to think about tables, it says format as a table. Tables are going to be used a lot over the course of this because tables give you a lot of features. At the end of the class, there is a 25-page handout, everything you've ever wanted to know about tables that I'll be sending to people. At first, it looks like all a table is makes it nice and pretty. You know, sit there and you want columns, headers, you sit there and make it hard to read if you want nice dark formats. If you've got emails with me with math on it, you usually nowadays get them in a table like this format. So we'll go pick a table here. What does it want? It says it automatically decides where the columns and rows are, and you tell it that it has a header, and what you get is a table that looks like this. Okay, that's cool, I guess. How is this useful? Well, first of all, if you have a lot of data, more than will fit on the screen, as you scroll down, notice at the top, all up originally, these are all letters. A, B, C, D, E, F, etc. It's the column number. But if you scroll down, those are replaced automatically with that header row. So you now have journal entry number, journal entry date, period, year, debit amount, credit amount, system, vendor name, description. The next thing you've got, these are just some of the functions you can do. That just helps you when reading it. But you'll also notice these drop-down boxes. What these do is they give you something, pops this up where you can sort smallest number to biggest number. You can sort by color. In this case, they're not, the alternating color backgrounds don't matter, but if you make some of them red for some reason, you can filter by selecting, I only want to see any specific ones of these. Now for the numbers, it doesn't matter, but we're going to sort the smallest to largest. We've got over here, dates, you've got date filters, which is useful. You want to know only the bills that came in March. So you get rid of all of them and then go back and click March. And now you will only see the 4 bills you paid in March. You can combine filters, but there's not that many here, so I'm not going to worry about it. You can go by period. You can look for only the big ones. Go in here, sort, and say, I want number filters greater than 500, say. I need to look at the keyboard when I type. It works better. And now what you see are the bills, only the bills that are over 500. You can do the same thing with the other columns. And by doing this, what you've ended up doing is created a much more useful way of being able to look at the data. Now, way off to the right up here is table design. You have some more options. First, and this is really important if you have more than one table in a spreadsheet, and as we go through this, we will be doing that, naming the table, because then you'll know what the tables are. So we'll call this transactions, just because it's a dumb name. But one over here, you can sit there. You'll notice you have a choice of header row, total row, banded rows. Banded rows makes the colors that way you can easier to read. You can make the first column darker, which matters for some tables, not for this one. You can do that same thing for last column, banded columns, and the filter button. If you don't like the filter button, you can make it go away. Now the total row is kind of cool. You turn on the total row, you now have a row down here. It didn't exist before that says total. Nothing's added here, but it's a useful row. What can you do with the total row? Here at the bottom of this row, click in there. You now have a downward arrow. When you click on it just right, you can sit there and go, I want to know the average of this, or I want to know how many of them, or I want to know how many of them are just numbers, or what the biggest one is, or the smallest one is. The one you'll probably use a lot is sum. Standard deviation. That's useful if you are a statistics person. And there are other functions you can do. You can basically put in lots and lots of functions into here. Generally, you'll find sum is the one you do the most. There we go. And now you'll notice it has a sum. What they don't tell you is this sum is not actually a sum. It is not the SUM function. It's actually the subtotal function, but it does that automatically. And what's the difference between subtotal and sum? Well, with subtotal, if you go back to that filter thing and you want to go, I only want to see the ones that are greater than 500. It now only adds up the ones that are greater than 500. The others are still there. They're just not hidden. They're just hidden. So you can do this to do quick analysis. I want to see only the big ones. And you can see what's there. You don't have to do the filter in that row. You can sit there and go over to the description field. Is way over there. Drop that down. You only want to know how much money you spent on Facebook. Now, Facebook, for some reason, has all these. Well, we'll make life a little easier. Facebook. FACEBK, and it checks only the things that say Facebook and then the invoice. And what you find is $1,504.79 was spent on Facebook. Did you have to go through and add it up by hand? Nope, you've got it all right here. So you can do that very simply using the table. Tables are very useful to, you could do all of this without a table, but it is a lot easier to do it with a table. And so that gives you that advantage. Other things you can do with tables we'll show you when we start working with converting a report. And that's where we spend a lot of time on them. On a table, we'll talk about some other things. You can add columns very easily. Just add a column, insert, and you have a column. Now, what we want here is we're going to just sit there and type in a formula. I'm going to sit there and let's make a stupid function equals this field. Now notice, here's where tables become useful. Instead of getting the normal, this is cell D2, you get the, I want the whatever's in the year times whatever the period is. And notice it says year times period. All of a sudden, you have a formula that explains exactly what you did, so you don't have to sit there and go back and go, what's column C again? What's column D? Then you hit enter, and it fills it in for the entire column. This gives you the ability of making self-documenting code. You can fill up columns like this. Again, you can do this by hand, but it's a lot easier when you do this in a table because you only enter in the formula once, and the formula is the same formula throughout the table. Now, that's a pretty stupid table. I'm going to make this instead net amount. For those of you who are accountants, you realize that debits and credits are opposite each other. A debit is, in this case, it's a positive because we're looking at expenditures, and a credit is a negative. So a debit account would be, so we're going to make the formula equals this minus credit. Basically, we're going to make it, it's the debit account minus the credit account. That seems simple, except you'll notice there we had in this row two negatives. So now we've got at the total, going back to the total of the net amount, put in the total. And we're going to do a sum again, and it's $10,087.19. That's actually the total of debits minus the total of credits. In this case, we know what the actual expenditures were. This number, the 10,000, is what's going to appear on the summary. This gets compared to the budget and all those other things. And this is what, when someone says, how much did you spend on advertising? This is the number you want, because it's the total of the debits minus the credits. The default format, negatives are red, so you can change the format if you wish. So that gives you a lot of things you can, that helps you quickly generate formulas. Now, within there, you'll notice it uses debit and credit. Outside the formula, let's just do a normal sum. Ignoring the total, what we want is the sum of this column. Now notice what it just did. It no longer says we want the sum of F2 to F38. It says it is the sum of transactions, which is the name of the table that you already set up. And what are we totaling? We're totaling the entire debit amount column. Again, this will mean if you're doing this on some other sheet, you know exactly where that number came from, because it tells you. You don't have to look it up and say, what sheet was that on? Yeah, good practice, by the way. You would also change the name of the sheet to something useful. So again, by using tables, you've also made you don't have to name every one of the cells, or you don't have to sit there and say this range has got a range name of, and whatever it is going on there. You don't have to assign names because it does it for you automatically. Now, there on the sheet on the handout that you'll be getting, there are 10 useful features. First, we've talked about, one of them, which is the fact that on here you've got filtering and sorting all in one spot, so you can get to both of them. And the column headings being visible, so you don't have to scroll to the top. You can sit here and remember what they are. By the way, this means if you do insert a column, do name it, because if you insert a column, oh, right, once you're scrolled down, this is something that I forgot to mention. When you first have it here and it's A, B, C, D, if you click here, you get the whole column and you can insert a column. Once it's scrolled down and you click on the heading name, it picks only the data in the, you'll notice when you scroll past it, it's no longer selected. So by clicking the heading, you've actually clicked on the contents of that file. But so scrolling, yeah, we can make it pretty. If you don't like this format, you can sit there and go, I don't like this format. Let's go back to data design and go quick styles and pick a different style. Let's go for green because it's dealing with money. Notice the whole look changes. Sometimes you get ugly results. You may want to pick that out. If you have additional data, let's go to the right. Let's get rid of the stuff that I can't find a single use for, which is actually the user might be useful. Let's make a new column. It just expanded the table automatically. And I filled it with random numbers. Completely meaningless, just to show you that you can create a whole new column in your table by doing that. Now, if you had a, without having to expand the table, it just expands on its own. If you don't want to expand it, by the way, you can always, after you type in another column, and it does that whole column thing, you could sit there and go, no, I don't want a column. And so you'll still have what you typed, but it will not make it as part of the table, so that you aren't stuck with leaving blank columns next to your table, because you can always override it. We've talked a little bit about the total row and what you can do here. We can add other any formulas you do. Will calculate the whole column. We've talked about that. The structured names, we've talked about that. I'm going through the top 10 reasons. You can click and select all the data with a single click. And if you make a chart based upon a table, it'll be automatic. You'll have the table as the data source. If you insert another row in the table, the chart automatically updates, which is really useful if you're doing charts. There's more to tables, but that's what we're going to talk about right now. Oh, the last thing is, if you don't like your table, for some reason you've done all this work, you don't like your table, you can go down, you go pick any cell inside the table, right click, go to table, and convert to range, and all of the stuff you just did, most of it goes away. Not all of it. Yeah, so I want to change it to a normal range. You do that, and now we're back to A, B, C, D, and all that stuff. So you've lost some of the filtering stuff. The formats still stay, but you do lose some of the functionality of the table this way. You don't get the cute dynamical tables anymore. So you'll notice the formula changed back to the sum of sheet 1, F2 to F38. So you can, if you decide you don't like the table because it's confusing or something, you can always change it back. Now, tables are a nice, useful feature, and pulling out data is a nice, useful feature. But the reality is, that's a simple thing for a data table. And while it's useful when you're building up even bigger reports, that's somewhat limited usage. So we're going to look at something else now, which is how to deal with nicely formatted tables. Nicely formatted reports. You don't need this open anymore. There's closed. No, I don't want to save my changes. So anyway, back in Springbrook, we don't need this anymore, and we don't need this anymore. There is a report that I use a lot called budget status. All the reports in Springbrook, you sit there, you select the report, you select what you want, and then you go to the print button, same as always. I have no idea where print goes. I'm sure there's a setup somewhere, but I've hit print and nothing has ever happened here. Maybe there's somebody out there that's got a printer that gets my occasional screw-ups on their printer. The print preview button will run the report, and the Excel button will bring you to Excel. First, let's talk about print preview. This looks like this. This is the budget status report for the year so far as of a few minutes ago. It's a nice, useful report. It gives you, and I've got it large. I've got it set up this way, hard to read, so it's easy to display on the class. It gives you the name of the account. It gives you the budget. It gives you how much was spent. It gives you how much is left. It tells you how much was encumbered and tells you how much was available. It's a nice, simple report. It gives you subtotals, all this nice stuff. And this is a report that's nicely formatted. What I mean by nicely formatted is if you go back and run the report as an Excel file, you go to the jobs listing, it will show, when it's done, show up here as an Excel file with a nice little Excel logo. This one will, the first one is that first report, and the Excel file goes into Excel. It's thinking, and there we go, open up Excel. You'll notice the people that wrote Springbrook did their best to make this report look as close as possible to this report. Got the same column headings, you've got the same stuff at the top, you've got stuff at the bottom, you've got the subtotals. And if you just want to print it, this does a pretty good job. What it doesn't do is page breaks. Basically, it thinks it's one giant page. This is the stuff at the top of the page. And way down here is the stuff at the very bottom of the page, which is the name of the report, the name and the date and the time that it was printed. And over here is a page number. And it's page 284, but you don't get any others in between. Now, how do they do this to make it look so nice? What they do is use some features of Excel. First, they do different font sizes. More importantly, if you look down on the left side, they hide rows. They also merge cells. Here you can see this is A4, A5, no, sorry, A5, B5, B4, and this one with my name is merged cell with columns C, D, E, and F into one cell. This is really nice for printing and absolutely a horror show if you're trying to actually work with it. The other thing that you find helpful are all these subtotals. If you want to know all the revenues, you're going to have to somehow exclude all these subtotals. There are cute little ways about adding up everything and then dividing by 2 because everything's got a subtotal, but it's a royal pain and it doesn't always work when things don't have subtotals. So I'm going to talk about how to clean up. This is a well-formatted report. Next meeting, we're going to talk about what happens when it doesn't come out nice and pretty like this. And there are examples when they don't. And it's on different reports. You'll have to experiment with your reports to see if they come out well like this. So what you want to do to turn this into useful information, into a useful field, is a bit of cleanup. If you know how to do macros, you will be able to do the first half of this as a macro. And I have it here on my developer tab on macros. I have one that says clean up Springbrook. It doesn't do it all, but it does half of it. What am I doing? Well, first, let's get rid of the logo. The logo is pretty when you're printing. It's not so useful when you're actually going to work with the data. There. Second, we want to sit there, select the whole spreadsheet. And you do that by clicking up here between 1 and A, up in the upper left corner of the spreadsheet. Click on it. Format cells. Under alignment, what you want to get rid of, you'll notice we've got a box here, this box within the wrap text that says some cells were okay with wrapping text, some cells were not. We don't want to wrap text. So we click once, we'll try to wrap every cell. We click it again and we go to no wrapping, or we can go back through the same cycle. We want it no wrap. And again, merge cells. Some cells are merged, some are not. If we click this, it'll merge everything into one giant cell and probably crash and burn. I've never said do this, and I don't recommend. We don't want any merged cells. Okay, we've now gotten rid of those. We do OK. It thinks, and now you'll notice when you scroll down there, remember this took up 3 columns. It's now just 1 column. Same, this is just 1 column, just got a lot of data. So we've gotten rid of all the merging and we've got to wrap cells. The other problem, you'll notice here between row 2 and 4, there's actually a row 3. They insert little slivers of rows so that you can actually get the spacing to look right. When you look at you'll notice that when you get in the body, almost every single row has a hidden row in between them. So again, going back to here, this time we're going to format we're going to go and do some formatting. Under the Home tab, under Format, it's under Cells. I'm used to dealing with more on the screen, so it's not out there. You go to Format, and you'll notice here you have Auto Fit Row Height. You can also get to it from here and go Format, Row Height, Auto. Generally, you get it from up here, though. There we go. Cells, Format, Auto Fit Row Height. And now all those rows show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they're now there, but you can also see all those empty rows. So now we've done the big stuff. This can still be done through a macro. get rid of the first few rows because there's nothing useful here. If you didn't remember to get rid of the logo, it will still be out here kind of ugly. And then you want to go and make the columns pretty. The account number, you'll notice here's the account number. B, C, and D are garbage, so we don't need them. Delete them. I get this menu by right-clicking. There's your account name. Columns C and D are meaningless. Delete that. Even though the budget amount appears here, it's because it's left formatted. There's nothing actually in column C. We can get rid of column C. And there's your budget amount. We can get rid of columns D and E. And there's your period amount. In this case, because I ran the report between period 1 and period 15, the period amount and year-to-date amount are the same thing, so I can get rid of that completely. I'm going to get rid of variance because that really is just the first column minus the second column, because I can always recreate it as formula. And get rid of that. Now we have the encumbered amount, which is useful. And then everything else can be redone as a formula, so I'll get rid of those here. Okay, now we have the information we really want from the report, which is the account number, the account name, the budgeted amount, period amount, the encumbered amount. This will change for you depending on what report you're working with and what information you really need. However, we still have all this crap of all these empty rows and these subtotals and all the stuff that we don't care about. So we can sit there and go, let's go over. Now what I've done, I've selected the top and I'm holding down the Shift key and the page down key. And I'm going through at this point 3,000 rows, 4,000 rows, 5,000 rows, 6,000 rows, 7,000 rows, 8,000 rows, 9,000 rows. This is a big report, and you really would like to have it useful rather than nicely printed. You want to be able to manipulate the information. We're at 13,000 rows and still scrolling. And there are actually longer reports in Springbrook, but this is a pretty bad one, which is why I'm using it. And we get down to past the bottom of it, and we're at 18,000 rows. These, you'll see the actual ending is scrolling up. There it is. This is the actual end at 18,034. Go back to the top. Go to filter. Data. There is data. And on here, you'll see the filter button. Remember on the table, you could sit there and do a filter automatically. Well, we're doing it manually because we're not a table yet. Do the filter. Now, one thing I've noticed on Springbrook, and you'll have to, if you're not doing a Springbrook account number, you'll have to figure some other way of testing this out. But here, account numbers have dashes. Name of fund, department, the subtotal things, they do not have dashes. They do not have hyphens. So what I'm going to do is go back up to the filter, and I'm going to say, under text filters, I want anything that does not contain a hyphen. If I do that, it thinks, and what I've now got, you'll notice it's turned blue, which means there's a filter in effect. All those account numbers just disappeared. They're still there. They're just hidden. Now I'll go back and scroll down again, the same 18,000 rows. Luckily, you only have to do this once. It's not that long. I'm already a quarter of the way there. Halfway, a third way. Halfway there. Scrolling along. Going down. And again, when it stops being blue, you know you're past the filter. If you just say delete the rows, the problem with Excel is they may, and some, depending on the version, delete the rows that are hidden too. So the first thing you want to do is go to, let's see, find under editing, find and select. You want to see, go to special. Usually this nice box. When you're in Excel, you can go to notes if you've got notes. You can go to constants. You can go to formulas. You can go to blanks. You can do the current region, but you're already there, so I don't know why. Current array, objects, row differences, all of this nice stuff. The one that's really useful is visible cells only. If you click visible cells only, you'll now notice there's little white lines wherever there's a missing row. Notice here between 8 and 10, there's a white line. Between 10 and 12, there's a white line. What it's done is unselected the missing rows. Then you can go right click, wait for it to figure it out, delete row. Now, say yes. This is a long function. It takes a while. You've got the spinny thing going on there because you are deleting a whole bunch of visible cells. You'll notice between line 22, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Interesting. Let's go back and see it all. Huh. All right, let's go see what it's doing. I think it's still thinking because it's not letting me select things. Yeah, let's go back to where we were. Nope. All right, I'm going to redo this. See if we can go back to where it was, or if I've managed to lock up Excel with a number of programs I'm working with, which I might be. This, by the way, gives you an important safety tip that I forgot to mention. In general, if you are in the middle of doing something, back to here, back to downloads, grid export 2, opening up Excel. I managed to crash Excel. The seventh, yeah. See if it remembers where we were. This is an experiment to see whether or not, when you do document recovery, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it didn't give me all this stuff. First rule of thumb, when you're working on a file and you are doing something big, save often because sometimes things go wrong. So let's see, what are we? Save as. This is, right, we want to save it as an XLS file. Save, actually bad location. Let me save it again. Save as. We want to save it into the downloads folder where it's nice and safe. And we're saving it as an Excel workbook. So there we are. So first we save it there. Then we get rid of the stuff that we've done before. I'm going to sit there and actually I'm going to run my macro, which does half of it, just because doing it all over again is dumb. Macros, clean up Springbrook, run. And you sit there and you hum a little bit. You'll notice it's going through there. And it's at the bottom, you see it's doing things. And now we have the 5 columns I was interested in. That's why macros are useful. That way you don't have to do this again. We're going to save it again. That way, if it screws up again, we'll have to start here instead of where we wrote before. Scrolling down. And by watching me screw it up, you'll learn not to. Save early, save often. You know, at my age, you'd think by this point, I'd remember to do that always. But everyone forgets. And it's after you've worked on a file for 2 hours that you screwed something up. Scrolling. Data. filter. The reason why you can't put data filter, or I haven't been able to put data filter into the macro, is because the amount of rows you have may change, and it'll do whatever you selected. And if your report is actually longer, then it won't help. So it does not contain a dash. Save again, just because I'm paranoid now. Down. Home. So find and select. Go to special. Visible cells only. Delete row. Delete entire seat row. It's thinking. So far, so good. It stopped spinning, and there we go. Let's see if it worked. Ah, this time it worked. We scroll up, you'll notice that we have this big empty space. We open it up, select all, do OK, and that 18,000 row monstrosity is now only a 5,000 row monstrosity. The other issue is that the name of the report, GL budget status, has a hyphen in it, so you actually have to delete that row separately. Okay, we have a nice bit of data. This is a useful report. We've got columns for everything. We've got amounts for everything. It's most of the way useful. We're going to turn this into a table because we'll find this useful. Let's do the orange again. There we go. Yes, that's what I have. Now, this is most of a useful report. There are some things I would like differently. Interesting. It still thinks that's a report. Delete that. There we go. Now, the problem is when you look at these reports here, we have fund, cost center, state function code, object, and project numbers all in one messy pile. I'd love to separate them. 3, 4, 5. Oops, that's 6. Insert. Column 1, 2, whatever. Column 1 is going to be the fund. Column 2 is going to be the cost center. Column 3 is going to be the function. If anybody wants to know what that is, the state says that we have to use it, and that's why we have that 3-digit number. Column 4 is the object, and number 5 is the project number. Okay, how are we going to do this? Are we going to sit there and go 001, 001, and just do it by hand? No, that would be insane. Also, it would turn it into numbers, and we'd lose the opening things. Instead, there's some very useful text functions. And that's why we talked about learning some text functions. These functions are left, mid, and right. The fund number is the first 3 numbers here. So let's say equals left, parentheses, left of what? This, comma, how many? 3. We now have fund numbers, a whole column of fund numbers. Does it actually just give you 01s the whole way down? No, if you go down to the very bottom, you'll get 901. So you've rapidly created all the fund numbers. Unfortunately, fund is the only number that's on the left. So now we're going to do mid. Mid pulls out what's the middle of a string, equals MID. Again, what string? That one. It's going to start at position 4. That's position 5, and it's 6 long. And there's all the cost centers. Again, go down to the bottom. You'll see that here it picks up whatever the cost centers are. And we don't need the column that wide, so we shrink it down. The function number, and I can't think of a reason why you'd need function number. It's only useful in very narrow reports. I use it when producing the advertisement. Equals mid again. Here, comma 12, comma 3. You memorize these after a while. And you get the state function code. The object code equals mid, comma 16, comma 6. And now you've got all the object codes. And finally, the project number. This one's easy. It's on the right. And you would use the function right, comma, fix. How is this useful? You want to know all of the personnel services. Text filter begins with 5.1 or begins with 5.2. Congratulations, all you see now are all the personnel service costs. These are the direct ones, the state retirement, all that other stuff. And if you're at the very bottom, well, that's right, we haven't put in the, and there's a row, a total row. You can now sit there and go, we've got the budget for all of that is whatever that number is, some, and we know that that's how much we're budgeting for position and how much we've actually spent, etc. Quick, dirty analysis that doesn't require using the report and doesn't require running a separate report for each one of these. So far, so good. Here's a problem. What if you're going to look at a cost center? And we've got a total of $1.3 million budget. The reality is that's not its budget, because what we have mixed in here and the objects are revenue objects and expenditure objects. So you want to do one other thing, which is break out using a function called if. You want to break things into revenues and expenses. Okay. So we're going to make one more count. We're going to make it on the year to date because the budget we don't care about. We're going to add a column. And we're going to say net. Net YTD amount. Okay, so that's a nice column name. We're going to need a little bit fancier formula. How do you know if an account is a revenue or an expenditure? All of those who are accountants already know. Here's the quick answer. And there's actually two answers you can use, but the one that's safer is look at the object. Objects basically start with either threes. This is in the income statement. They either start with threes, or if you scroll down, you eventually hit fives. Eventually. As we keep scrolling, we hit first. Wow, there you go, fives. So what you can tell is that what it is that revenues start with threes and expenses start with five. So here's a function for you that will help you with that. It's called the if function. Now, the way the if function works is equals if. Down here, you can see it gives, there's some sort of logical test. That's something that'll give you true or false. Equals 1 is true because 1 is equal to 1. But equals 1 equals 2 is false because 1 is not equal to 2. In this case, we're going to do if, back to our string function, left. You can go to the object, if left of this, but only the first character is 1. That's your logical test. Okay, what do we want if it's true? We want this number if it's true. But what do we want if it's false? We want a negative of that number. Then we hit enter, then we hit there, and whoops, picked up something wrong. Okay, if left E2. Oh, if left E2 doesn't, I don't have to have it testing anything. Because it's if left E2 1, all that says is if 3. What if 3? So it's equals, quote, 3, quote. Because we're looking at a text, we have to actually sit there and say, put it in quotes, make sure that we're looking at it as the text character 3 as opposed to number 3. We do if the left is equal to 3, then it's a revenue, otherwise an expenditure. We hit enter again, and there we go. All of these revenues are positive numbers, and all these others are negative numbers. This means you can go down to the bottom and say, look down there. Let's do the sum again. And as of right now, we're $79 million in the good for a variety of reasons. The bills haven't come in. We've got a lot of property taxes that are front loaded, et cetera. Well, that's kind of cool. Let's do a little more interesting. Let's look at an individual fund. You pick a fund. Remember, we set, because it's a table, you can do that. Pick any fund. Pick a fund. Let's do water and sewer because they have a lot of transactions. So first we want to get rid of everything. And go 411. And at this point, there's $6 million in profit because the timing of the bills and receipts. We get paid, and we have to then follow up by paying the bills. There's a reason it takes so long to close the books, because the bills take so long to come in, long after the money comes in. So you generally expect that. So you can sit there by taking this out of the system. You can turn this into a useful piece of information that you can do your data analysis. Now, what kind of data analysis do you want? I don't know. That's up to you. You're the one who knows what you're looking for. But by turning it into a table, you can use all the characteristics of Excel to build up what you're doing. So we could just do by using if, by using left, by doing mid, by using right. You can sit there and quickly do data analysis. Here, we could sit there and say, how much is water and sewer in the water and sewer fund itself paid for projects this year? There's only one project in the water and sewer fund, so let's do that. That's a bad example. Let's go back to look at all of the utility funds. How do we do all the utility funds? Well, not the utility, could just count them, but let's look at all of the enterprise funds. And that all the enterprise funds start with 4. For those of you who are not accountants, the fund numbers mean something. Okay, let's go a quick talk about that. You'll notice they could start with zeros, ones, twos, threes, fours, fives, and then there's weird ones that are only used by accounting. What they mean is 0 means a general fund. 1 means it's a special revenue fund. 2 means it's a debt service fund. 3 means that it's capital project fund. 4 means it's an enterprise fund. And 5 means it's an internal service fund. So if we want to sit there and look at all of the enterprise funds, we just want to begin with 4. And now we have all of the internal service funds. And now we want to look just at the projects. So that's everything that's not 000. And what we can find is, as of right now, go down to the bottom. They spent $44 million on projects as of whatever report I'm running on here. So by doing these quick functions, these quick sorts, you can answer a lot of questions without going to dig up stuff, without trying to make fancy reports and all this stuff. So you've got lots of options that you can deal with Excel by using tables and by pulling the data out of Springbrook and just playing with it yourself in Excel. You've got a lot of power. Your boss can ask you questions and you can look like a genius without too much work. And bosses, please ignore that last statement so that when you ask someone to do something difficult and they come back quickly, you'll be able to just appreciate them for the fact that they're doing all the work that you need from them. So that's all I want to talk about today were these things. Now, the next meeting, we go back to Springbrook. Oh, I didn't lock up. The next meeting, we're going to talk about a lot more detail about ugly reports. And we're going to use as an ugly report this one. And let me run it. And you'll see soon why it's an ugly report. This is a good report because everything is on one line. You don't have to worry about pulling things from other lines. All the information you need is on one line. And also, the columns the conversion to Excel is very clean. This other report, which will be here soon, doesn't work that way. Oh, back to Excel, a couple other things. Remember I said budget status, year to date, and encumbered were the only columns you actually needed? Why is that? Because available is just the budget minus the sum of year to date and encumbered. That's it. So why import it when you can recalculate it? You can sit there and say, hey, here's my available balance. So you have a lot of, so it makes it much easier. If you just have it raw, you don't need the calculated numbers. Also, the percentage, you can sit there and do same as a percentage. It's just a formula. And if it's just a formula, there's no reason to import it into your data screen. You only need that way you only have the columns you need. Like I said, function isn't really all that useful for most reports, but it is for some.